Hello everyone, welcome to episode 164 of Let's Plant. In the previous episode, we were working on cleaning up the garden, removing most, if not all of the flower stalks. I think I still left a few in the garden, but most of them are gone, at least the ones that I can see. And I did that in order to manage the pests, especially now that we are in winter and most of my plants are dormant. I wouldn't want them to be destroyed by pests while they are sleeping. Now with all of those bits of maintenance out of the way, I think we are now ready to move on to the next phase of our landscaping. And I think it's about time that we start planting again. The last thing that we worked on was this coral reef inspired tapestry on the ground, and what I want to do next is to start working on the rest of the garden, especially now that we are in winter, and in winter we tend to have lots of rains, and I'm sure you know that from my recent postings. It has been raining almost constantly for the past few weeks, several weeks now, and that kept me from doing any planting because, as you know, that involves trimming, chopping, and you wouldn't want to expose any of those to moisture. But now here we are, it's quite dry today, and there's a few things that I want to do in this episode. Let me walk you through my agenda. Now, I know I said that I'm looking forward to planting and doing lots of stuff outdoors, but one of the first things that I have to do, unfortunately, has to be indoors, or at least under cover. Let me show you. Some of you might remember that I was sent a grow light kit by Mars Hydro. It is a 1000 watt kit, and I was thinking that it's about time that I start using it, especially now that we are in winter, and I think this is the perfect time to do some tests with it. I needed to figure out a place where I could work on my grow lights. I initially wanted to do it inside my computer room, right next to my editing computer. But unfortunately, the problem with that is having it indoors in the house means that it is within reach of the kids, and I wouldn't want them to mess around with it or potentially destroy it. So I figured the next best option is somewhere out here in our garage. Now, as you can see, we have shelves here, and I did my best trying to reorganize, moving out some of the boxes. I think this is your typical hoarder's garage. As you can see, I cleared out this space, giving enough space for my grow lights. This is the box that it came in, so I would imagine that it is slightly narrower than that. And I picked this spot in particular because there's a power socket right behind this box. Let me show you. I'm not sure if you could see this, but there's two right here. So this is enough space, or at least this is the perfect spot for my grow lights. Now, for those of you who have been following the channel for a while, you would know that I'm an absolute newbie when it comes to grow lights. I mostly have my plants out in the ground. I am fortunate to have a climate where I can do that, but I think it's about time I start learning about grow lights. The motivation behind this is I want to work on my hybrids. You might remember the seedlings that I sowed a couple of years ago, and I would like to help move them along in terms of growth. And having the grow lights here would be perfect for that, I think. So here's my rough plan. Since the design of the grow lights require them to be hanged, and they come with rope ratchets, which allows you to adjust the length of the rope. My plan here is to create some sort of vertical frame where I would hook the entire assembly, and I'm not really sure how much clearance I should provide because, again, this is my first time working with grow lights. So I think I would need to do a bit of measurement. So here's a grow light with a reflector, and I would imagine that it would be sitting somewhere like this. And one of the things that I have to know is how much of this ratchet rope I should be using. So to start, I just have to put out this hanger which came with the kit. This basically allows me to balance out the grow lights on the rope ratchets. So I think all I have to do is to attach this on either end, and from here attach the hook assembly and see how high this has to go and plan my frame accordingly. I'm not sure how close to the grow lights the plants need to be. This is something that I have yet to research. So I'm assuming, based on what I've read about LED grow lights, they would need to be pretty close actually, about half a foot, more or less, depending on the strength and how much light the plant needs. So I would imagine that something like this or even like this would work. And if I give myself some slack, so maybe I could build the frame assembly such that it is the same height as this shelf over here. Basically, I would just have to extend the whole thing outwards and we're good to go. But for now, that's what my intuition is telling me. I may be wrong with my assumptions. So for those of you who have more knowledge than me when it comes to grow lights, I would happily accept your suggestions and comments. Please let me know what I should do down in the comments and I'll have a look, and hopefully I'll be able to formulate a plan based on what you told me. The next thing on my agenda is the Philippines. I mentioned in the previous episode that I wanted to fill up the gaps with a bunch of plants, mostly the plants that tend to grow in colder conditions compared to echeveria. And for that, I was originally thinking of using some sedums, but this reminded me that I haven't been working with sempervivums for quite a while now. I have a bunch here, well, just a few clumps in the ground, and I think they would be perfect for this spot because it's winter right now. They are actively growing and they would be able to complement my echeveria for this spot. The concept is simple. Basically, we have some summer growing plants, mainly my echeveria. They tend to grow, they tend to be actively growing during the warmer months. Now that it is winter, they are starting to slow down and any excess water would tend to stay in the soil. Now I need to have a bunch of plants that are actively growing during this season. That way they would be taking care of the water problem, preventing my echeverias from having wet feet, or at least preventing them from staying wet for too long. And I think the sempervivums would be perfect for that. Unfortunately, I'm an echeveria collector, not a sempervivum collector, so I only had a few clumps of them in the garden. But thankfully, I'm a member of a local succulent swap group, so I reached out to them and asked for sempervivums in exchange for cuttings of some of my plants. There's a couple of them that have heeded my request, so I now have a few more clumps of sempervivums to work with. So thank you for the rescue. Unfortunately, the sun is setting and it's going to be dark soon, so I guess I'll have to continue working on this in the morning. Immediately after filming that scene, I remembered that I have a friend who knows a lot more about grow lights than myself. You could say he's an expert. Of course, I'm talking about Alex. So I sent him a message about it, explaining what I wanted to do. His initial response was asking me whether I'm using a grow tent or an open structure. I think I'm going with an open setup for now, but will eventually move towards a tent. When I do get to that point, I will also have to think about ventilation. He further added that I could probably use my knowledge with building computers to rig up some sort of good ventilation using computer case fans. Anyway, that's something for future Chuck to worry about. For now, I just have to worry about getting some sort of platform for my grow lights to hang from. So I didn't quite get the chance to work on this in the morning like I hope, but better late than never. So the plan is to fill up the gaps between the echeveria with a bunch of winter growers, and the best example that I could think of is sempervivum. I chose sempervivum because they are also rosette based and they would not stand out too much in that spot. The second reason I picked them is because they are working perfectly in my shaded area, which I call the alcove, and I think between all of those echeveria there's enough light for them to thrive and grow and not stretch too much. So as mentioned, I'll be picking up the sempervivums that I have in this spot and I'll be transplanting them somewhere in the Philippines. I've got all of the sempervivum in my tray now, and I think before we get started, let me just explain the mechanics behind what I want to do here. So I'm planning for the semps to go in the gaps between echeveria, and they'll be mostly acting as scrubbers or sponges to trap or pick up the excess water that happens to pull around, especially whenever we get rainy days, and that's pretty common here, especially during winter. So the echeveria won't be using up most of that water, so semps to the rescue. I know I won't have anywhere near enough that I would need to fill up everything, so I'll have to be creative and mix it up with some sedums or maybe even some trailing plants on the edges by the rocks. let's get started. Unfortunately, that's all the semps that I have, and it's getting quite dark, so I'll fill up the rest of the gaps with other filler plants tomorrow. It's a brand new day and it would be nice to be able to fill up all of the gaps, but unfortunately I was checking the weather forecast and it looks like it's going to be raining tomorrow all the way to the weekend. That's 3 or 4 days of just rains, and that means that I shouldn't be making any cuttings now because they would just be staying wet for the next few days, and that's no good. So what we'll be doing instead is just to discuss some of my plans on how I would be approaching the problem of filling them up. And of course, I already mentioned that I would like to have sempervivums mainly because they would not stand out too much against the rest of the echeverias in this plot, because I want the focus to still be on the echeveria. If you look all the way here in the front, there's a lot of gaps. I think it would be better if you would use some plants that would gather attention, because at least this would take away some of the focus on the rocks and make it more vibrant. So I'm thinking the front should be mainly trailing plants, so I don't know, bunch of the string types of plants would be best. Maybe even some of the graptos, because those things tend to trail when they get long enough, and they do get long. And I talked about this in one of my previous videos where I showed you 40 different varieties of plants that could be used to fill up your garden. Some of them I've been using here and they've been growing quite a lot for the past few months that they have been here, so I think I could start taking cuttings from some of them. Yeah, I'm starting to reap the benefits of my previous work. Apart from filling up the Philippines, I would like to completely rework this section. This is going to be my new aeonium display area. So all of these plants, well, most of them would have to go. And I'll be redoing the landscapes, planting more plants, maybe even creating some ledges. I'm not sure on how I would do that. I have a couple of ideas. One would be creating some sort of arch here where I could hang some plants, since we already have some hanging plants at the edge of the eaves. So adding a few more here would be great, I think. Another idea was to create some sort of ledges or shelves outside of the window. So it was a suggestion provided by Marie Salonga on Facebook. And I think I kind of like that idea, only that it means that it would be pushing out the usable space. Because if I have a shelf or ledge somewhere around here, most of this space at the ground would no longer be usable. So I might consider moving out this landscape. I'll have to think about that. Right now we have dividers going all the way until here, but if I added some shelves, maybe I would need to push it all the way to here. It's an idea, but I haven't really decided, so I don't know. And finally, we have this section right next to the Philippines where I plan to include all of my agavoides hybrids as well as the bowl-shaped plants. This space is good for them. Unfortunately, it is rather flat and I would like to create some sort of interest by placing some heights. So my idea for this section is to create some sort of platforms at the back, maybe even something as tall as this, some ledges or maybe some stands. That would at least create some sort of cascade in the design, and that would be perfect for making everything visible at a single glance. I won't be able to do any more landscaping over the next few days because of all of the rains according to the forecast, so I think For the next few days, I'll be mostly doing some plans. I'll be drawing some plans and posting them on my Facebook or in my discussion group. So if you're not yet in the group, make sure to check out the Cerriscapades discussion group on Facebook. I usually post some behind the scenes or even some of my plans and discuss with some of my friends in there. And yeah, some of the ideas that I am applying here came from there. And on the topic of exclusive group, you might have noticed that I have just recently started doing memberships on my channel. This is just a complement to my Patreon. You could do either one. So if you wanted to support the channel in any way, feel free to sign up for memberships either here on YouTube or on Patreon. They are the same thing as far as I'm concerned. The benefits will be the same. On the basic supporter tier, your name would appear in the credits of my videos to show your support. Next tier up would be the contributor tier. You get all of the benefits of the supporter tier, but in addition, you are able to suggest topics, or if you provide some questions for me, I would address them in a video and I would totally credit you with coming up with the idea for that video. And next is the sponsor tier. This is an exact copy of what I have already been doing on my Patreon side. Basically, I give you naming rights for some of my projects and plants or whatever I decide to do in the garden. So you get to pick the names and I'll use them and let everyone know that it was your idea. And finally, there's a VIP tier. You're getting all of the benefits from the previous tiers and more. What that more is, I haven't really decided yet. It's up in the air at the moment, but it will definitely be something special. A lot of you have also been asking me about merch. I have started putting up some designs on Teespring. So if you have a look at the merchandise shelf here on YouTube, under the video, there are some photos of shirts and apparel. You might want to have a look at those, otherwise the link would be down in the description. And that's going to be it for this episode. I have to continue tidying up and prepare for the rainy days ahead, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye.